So ITIL, what is ITIL? Information Technology Infrastructure Library. So that is the acronym for ITIL. It is the most widely adopted approach for IT service management in the entire world. It's practical, it's simple, it's straightforward, and it helps to identify, plan, deliver, and support IT services to the business. You will constantly hear me talk about providing support to IT services that support the business. So when we talk about ITIL, the focus is not on the IT service desk. It's not on the IT organization. It's ultimately how the functions of IT support the business overall. So you'll hear me talk a lot about that. Um, ITIL is a framework and not a standard. It's different because standards, you have to adhere to everything within the standard. So ISO 9001, for example, every clause you need to address. And even the language is different. It will say, the organization must, or it has to adhere to, and it uses those strong words. But ITIL is not that way. So it's possible that you can take some of the concepts from the ITIL education, and you can take some of them and then you can leave the rest. And then as the organization turns and change, and maybe as your role turns and changes, you can go back and take some of those other concepts. So it's important to know that it's not a standard, it's a framework. There are a set of books. There are 5 books: Strategy, Design, Transition, Operation, and Continual Service Improvement, which we'll all talk about. And ITIL captures the best practices, which represent learning experience through leadership in the world's best-in-class service providers. So the history of ITIL, which we'll talk about, it captures best practices based on a lot of tests, based on a lot of user experiences, and they've come up with a set of best practices that can be used in various industries that have an IT component. Organizations should adopt and adapt to ITIL, and it's scalable. So it's something that can be used in any organization regardless of the size. So if you have a 10-person organization, they can be successful with adopting to ITIL and using those practices. And if you have a 10,000 organization, you should end up with the same type of result. And it's platform independent. And we'll talk more about that as well. Any questions?
Not right now.
Okay, ITIL history. So ITIL is a UK standard. It has been adopted in the United States and other parts of the world. But it's important to note that the life cycle itself drives effectiveness, progress, efficiency, and compliance. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the history of ITIL, but it was created in the late 80s by the UK government. It's gone through a couple different versions where it's focused on just the UK government, and then it evolved into an industry-wide set of best practices that could be adopted. Version 3 released the life cycle approach. And then in June of 2011, the 2011 edition was released. So this just goes to show that ITIL is not something that's new. It's been around since the 80s. It's started to become adopted in the United States close to the 2000, 2001 years, but it's not something that's new. And it's been proven true and has been evolving over the years. Okay, the ITIL service lifecycle. I should have asked you this earlier. Do you have a pen and paper handy?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So you absolutely want to know this service lifecycle. The way I remember it is the way that it's pictured on this slide. So we talked about the 5 the 5 different phases of ITIL. Service strategy is your core, and this is how I actually remember it in my mind as well. But service strategy is your core. So if you think of anything that has a core or nucleus, this is the heart of ITIL. This is the heart of your business practice. The heart of anything that you do is going to start at service strategy. Service transition, service operation, and service design help execute the service strategy. So once again, we're not just talking about what the IT help desk wants to do, what the IT organization wants to do, or what the service management team wants to do. The service strategy best represents your business. So who are the leaders? Who are the decision makers? Who are your key stakeholders? And service transition, operation, and design help to execute what's identified in your service strategy. Continual service improvement is very, very, very important, but often forgotten about. And we'll talk more about continuity service improvement, which is CSI. So I typically call that CSI. But CSI helps to make sure that nothing goes off track. So CSI is not something that happens at the end of the life cycle. This is a continual practice that works from strategy all throughout service transition, operation, and design. So it's very engaged, and it follows the entire life cycle. So just keep this in mind as we move forward.
So if service strategy is defined as a core, transition, operation, and design are executors, what is a adjective you'd use for CSI?
So CSI is more continual improvement or process improvement. It includes everything from making sure that you've met your metrics. It includes having a knowledge base, a lessons learned repository, making sure that you have a measurement repository, making sure you have past performance. So it's basically something that's propelling, is the way I would look at it, is something that's propelling your organization to stay on track, but also to grow. So this is taking your organization from being a maturity level 2 organization to a maturity level 4 organization. It would be taking your organization from having 1 contract to having 10 contracts. So you're constantly, CSI is constantly looking at what's being done and providing the organization with recommendations to get better, and also helping the organization mature so that it can grow, it can become more profitable, it can have repeatable processes, etc.
So results reviewer, and recommendations, and then that ultimately leads to a driver, and that's where scalability would come in.
Yes.
Okay, awesome.
Yep.
Thank you.
And CSI has a role in all of these. There's a strong connection between CSI and all of the other processes as well. I don't like when people say, oh, and CSI happens at the end. It actually doesn't happen at the end. It happens in tandem with everything else. It just has its own practice, it's its own process. So it has a distinct things that it does in its distinct function, but it actually happens in tandem with all the other process.
Excellent.
Okay, service and service management. Here's our first sets of definitions. To understand what service management is, we need to understand what services are and how service management can help service providers deliver and manage these services. So ITIL's definition of a service is the means of delivering value to a customer by facilitating outcomes customers want to achieve without the ownership of specific costs and risks. So if we think about what a service is, you provide, let's say you provide transportation. So there's a local bus service. The definition by way of ITIL would be a means of delivering value to a customer. So value could be, it's safer, it costs less, there's less stress involved. Whatever the customer defines as being valuable to them, you're delivering value to a customer by facilitating outcomes customers want to achieve without the ownership of specific costs and risks. So if we think about a bus service, a customer gets on the bus, they pay maybe $1.50. They have a seat, and the most that they have to do is pay attention to when they get off, right? That's the only thing they have to do. Be alert enough to know, hey, my stop is coming up. I ring the bell and then I get off. So the customer is getting where they need to be without the ownership of specific costs, maintenance on their car, gas, car insurance, and risk, right? They don't have to drive. They don't have to worry about being in an accident. Maybe they're too tired to drive, so they shouldn't be driving. Maybe they don't have a license. And so if we think about just catching the bus as a means of service, a service provider, being a local bus driver, it's a means of delivering value to a customer by facilitating outcomes customers want to achieve without the ownership of specific costs and risks. So that is the definition of a service. Any questions about that?
So the bus company would be the one providing the service, or
Correct.
the city is providing the service as an alternative to the a lot of traffic.
Well, the bus company is providing the service.
Okay.
Yep, so they are the service provider. So if you could technically take that onto, okay, well, the city is providing, and then, they may be funded with, money from other avenues, but ultimately the bus company is providing a service.
Okay.
But the main idea is that, and one thing that you should note is that the value that is being delivered to the customer is defined by the customer. It's not up to the service provider to say, hey, we're providing you with great value. And the service provider says, well, how is this a great value? You charge $5 for a bus ride. Or it takes me an hour and a half to get somewhere that it takes me 15 minutes to get to in a car. So it's important to note that in ITIL, the customer determines what's valuable and what's not valuable.
And does this framework cover a way to get that feedback from the customer?
Yes.
Excellent. I'm putting it into my work perspective, and we launched a program earlier this fall where we did a trade-in, trade-out program. And so we offered the service, but we also defined the value as we saw it and then used it as a justification.
Mm.
So I'm thinking this may help us, when we do these future initiatives where it's like, we want to launch this service, but we have a venue for figuring out what the value is actually going to be.
Yes.
Great.
Excellent. Okay.